Good evening. Good evening, Facebook family. Good evening, family and friends, viewers. Carolyn will be joining us momentarily. Right now, I'm going to introduce myself to those watching the archived video. My name is Dara Mormilli. I am the Brooklyn chapter representative with the Salgi Esophageal Cancer Research Foundation, and I've been advocating for esophageal cancer research and early detection for about 3 years now. Every year since 2019, I've been coordinating an event which is held not only in honor of my father, who passed away of esophageal cancer, but many other families who have lost loved ones to this cancer, not even knowing it was a cancer. My father was diagnosed in 2010. We had no idea it was a cancer at the time. And over the years, it was very difficult for me to collaborate anything in honor of this cancer, which is there's no mandated screenings, there's no early detection. But my mission at this point in time, now that we've hosted, three events, one was held virtually, my dream and my inspiration was to find a survivor to speak at our event. That was very difficult to find. So what I've been doing is reaching out through various social media platforms for survivors to have them share stories and to inspire other families, to educate families. And Carolyn, I connected with Carolyn recently through one of the social networking sites, raising awareness for esophageal cancer, where families are very confused in what to do, what their options are. And Carolyn, if you're there, you can join us if you're there. I'm waiting for Carolyn to come on to join us, and we're going to share her story. Her story is very unique. Carolyn is is a California native. Oh, here's Caroline. Let's have her come on in. California. She comes from California, so it's earlier there. And I connected with her recently. How are you, Caroline? Oh, I love your
Hi.
hat. I should put my
I,
hat on.
you should. Yeah. I mean, it's the week of Christmas, and I figured, I
It's great. You look
didn't wear,
adorable.
I have the whole outfit, but I decide, I'm like, no, I'll get really hot. So,
That's great.
um,
That's great.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you so much for coming on to this series. This is something I'm doing as a volunteer effort. As you know, we spoke in the past about the whole effort of showcasing survivors. And just introduce yourself to the viewers, because this is going to be archived for years and years to come. Just give us a brief introduction of yourself and your background, and what your story is briefly.
well, first, let me start off by saying thank you. And
You're welcome.
I really appreciate in the aftermath of your father's fight that
Thank you.
you are making this effort to find
Thank you.
awareness. And
Thank
so, and again, it goes a lot deeper than that. And I hope to be involved at some point I hope to be involved from here on out in doing what I can to
you.
help
Yes,
you
definitely.
and anyone else that is fighting the fight. So, but starting out, I am Carolyn, and you know my name. I live in Folsom, California. And um, starting out, I think that I lived a pretty active life most of my life, and I have really no medical history up until about 6 years ago. And so, literally, I mean, nothing. So, I didn't even take a Tylenol. The only long term issue that I always was fighting with was my spine. And that's because, first off, I was born with a spine defect, with spina bifida occulta, which after that, having grown up in the foster care system for 18 years, shouldn't say briefly, but I was subjected to a lot of trauma early on in life, which led to um, a lot of spine issues for me, unfortunately. And because I like and enjoy doing impactful sports like
Mm.
mountain biking and things like that, and a lot of it, it definitely has caused my spine to probably degrade a little faster than normal. But I don't have anything like osteoporosis or any of those other more significant diseases. It's mainly been disc failures and things like that that have started to occur. And it got to the point that in 2015, I walked into the door of seeing a surgeon. I mean, just point blank, finally had to walk in when I couldn't get back on my bike. I mean, it had gotten so bad that I couldn't even hike. I ended up walking into the door, and within 2 months from there, it was like, it was severe. I mean, at that point, I mean, right off the bat, I was under the knife for a 3-level fusion surgery. And I had some residual issues with that surgery after the fact. It started about 3 months, and that went on from 2015 and through approximately 2017. I was undergoing a lot of epidurals and facet joint injections. So literally hundreds of needles being poked into my neck to try to sustain my pain level. And then finally the disc above the 3-level fusion decided to herniate. And again, just kind of threw me out of my lifestyle again. I mean, I was going full speed ahead on my mountain bike. I was planning on doing racing again. It had been some years. Wow. And it basically threw me out of that. And so once again, and this is where all the symptoms actually really began. That's why I just want to cover a little bit of the background here.
Right.
I ended up having my lumbar spine. I have an area with my lumbar spine that also decided to go all the way and herniate in September of 2018. At the same time, I was fighting for another surgery to repair the other area. And I ended up in the hospital for 4 days. I couldn't walk. And I mean, it was terrible. And I had met a new surgeon that was not the same surgeon that did my first surgery. And he actually convinced me that a disc replacement would actually work for my lifestyle, would be the better option for that area of my spine directly above a 3-level fusion. And so on December 5th of 2018, I actually checked into the hospital, and I actually underwent that surgery. Well, when I woke up from that surgery, it wasn't the way that things should have played out. It came with instant complications, and I had a hematoma, I had a CSF leak. I mean, it was just an absolute utter nightmare. And this is when some of the relevant symptoms, right after this, some of the relevant symptoms that were related to the esophageal issue started happening. And I don't know why, but it just, it did.
And did you have any the regular symptoms from an EC, like any heartburn, any
that's
pain,
only
swallowing? Did you have any of that immediately after?
Well, that's just it. Intermittently throughout my life, sure, I had some acid reflux, this and that, off and on, but like a year can go by, 2 years, and I'd never even have experienced it. I had learned early on years ago, like I could take one Prilosec, and it would just knock it out, whatever was happening at that time. And like months could go by and I'd never even have to think about it. And I think that a lot of us normally can encounter those types of things, right? But it was so strong though that a Tums or something like that wouldn't work for it. I learned that the kind of reflux that I did have, it was a little more serious, I would need to take like a Prilosec, and I learned that would work. But even at this point in time, when this was all happening, if I was to say the last time I'd ever needed to pop a Prilosec, I mean, it had probably been at least a couple of years, since I had really had I think that I even had like an episode of like reflux. So, but when I came to from the surgery, all the complications, I made it through that. The hematoma reversed. They put a drainage tube in backwards, and it was blocked. And so basically what was happening is all the blood was starting to hang off the side of my thyroid. It was a crazy thing, but it was blocking my airway, nearly blocked my airway all the way. But that eventually resolved. The CSF leak, normally those can happen. It eventually, I would guess, it obviously resolved at some point. I didn't have a spinal tap put in for that. But then my neck was, all these things that weren't supposed to happen, my neck was blown up like a balloon. Another thing, and I woke up from this and suddenly like I'm having night sweats. I'm like, what? I never had this. I was, perimenopause, this, that. They wanted to use my age because I am 54. So, and I was at that time, I was 18. I know I'm losing track of time. 50, 51. Right. Do I even want to say that?
Right.
Like, yeah,
Still
no,
young.
I'm 20. I have 21, not 51 now.
Still young.
So, but in any case, where was I at?
So the symptoms that you were starting to have was briefly after this.
It was everything. Things started happening and I was reporting all this. The spine surgeon, I'll just say in advance, he abandoned me 6 months in after this because of the complications.
Wow.
It became too much for him. He basically was covering up what was happening, and there's a lot to that. But in any case, my other doctors were very concerned. Even my OBGYN doctor, I went to her and I said, this is what's happening. And even in her experience, she has never, ever seen a patient come to from a surgery and then suddenly just start experiencing postmenopause symptoms. It just is not, that wasn't something that she's ever seen. Right. And so she didn't believe that had anything to do with it. So the symptoms were primarily when I'd lay on my left side, and it was coming right out of where the cancer was found. I mean, obviously it was that area. It wasn't happening when I stand up and move around. It was primarily happening when I was laying down in bed at night. And sometimes it would, and even the night sweats too, same thing. The sweating was happening. The sweating was happening some even through the day. But it was really intense at night. And I had noticed if I laid perfectly still, like it wouldn't happen. It would be upon certain movements. Wow. And I wasn't quite, I mean, it was really difficult trying to figure out what was happening here. And so, but I'm good at documenting. So, I mean, I've got everything digitally, the communications with all my different doctors coming keeping all this, which has been a great tool for me to kind of go back and look at the timeline of things.
Do you recommend that? And as a sidebar, do you recommend, let's say families are watching right now, do you recommend, and I'm hearing this more and more, for anybody suffering from any symptoms or people telling their families, should they be keeping track of symptoms and signs, or
absolutely
we don't normally do that? And that's one of the things, is to pay attention to the signs that something is just not right.
It's not easy for a lot of people to write pen to paper or even on their keyboard at the computer to do that. I know it's not easy. The way I've done it myself, I can even say I'm really bad at that. Unfortunately, I'm really good at making sure that I have everything in writing between all of my doctors, because that's my tool. And they probably get a bit frustrated because I have a lot to say. Right.
Right. Oh, what happened? I think we lost Carolyn for a moment. Carolyn, are you there? I think we lost her for a minute. I know she was, maybe she got interrupted on her phone. Let's see if we lost her. I appreciate her coming on. Let's see if she comes back. I know last time we were doing a test discussion, she had some interruption on her phone, so maybe she had a incoming call or an incoming message. We'll just wait a second for her to come back on the live. Are you there, Carolyn? Okay. Yeah, you can send the request again. Okay, bring them on camera. Okay. Maybe it's just a connection issue. Well, she's coming back on, so she'll be here in a second. Sorry about that, Carolyn. I don't know what happened. Okay, she's coming back on. Thank you to our viewers who are being patient, and thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any questions to ask her, you can just type it in, and she'll answer your questions as you're watching. Okay, I'm trying to bring her back on. It might be a connectivity issue. Says that she's coming back on. Let's just be a little patient. I know it's a 3-hour time difference, obviously, between here and California, so I'm not sure if it's a timing issue as well. I requested to bring her back on. I'll say I think it's a connection issue. Okay. Just troubleshooting. I accepted her request. Okay. It says I'm sending an invite. It says that she's already a guest in the broadcast, so I'm not sure. Okay. Maybe it's a connectivity issue. Maybe you, Carolyn, maybe if you X out and then maybe re-request. Maybe that'll work. It says bring her on camera, so I'm trying to bring her back. I'm sending an invite. It says that she's already part of the broadcast, so I'm not sure why. Or maybe it's because I tagged her. Okay. Oh, okay. Now it should work. Now it said sending invite.
There it goes. I don't know. I mean,
I don't know.
my Wi-Fi is up and
It could be just a
strong.
connectivity issue. It could be. I mean, it's easy to invite you back on. It's you know, it's a 2-minute thing. That's why sometimes I like to keep the interviews short in case we have complications. But we can just bring you back on. It's okay. It might be the time difference. I don't know. Sometimes there's a time difference and there's like a connectivity, you know, issue. But anyway,
or a Facebook issue.
A Facebook issue.
Yeah,
Facebook has more issues than we
it's
than
their,
we
it's
know
their
about.
servers, right? Yeah, it's their servers behind the scene.
So let's go towards the esophageal cancer. I guess the symptoms that provoked you to
the symptoms that provoked me to seek a GI before I even would have contemplated anything like cancer initially. And so initially, by the time like all those symptoms and all the stuff I was going through, where I was getting at is 3 weeks after those symptoms started, after that spine surgery, my appendix went into, I mean, New Year's Eve 2019, I was in the ER and they ended up taking me in for an appendectomy. And I was still very much recovering from the spine surgery and and still had complications going on. And so I ended up undergoing that on New Year's Eve. And then following that, the same symptoms that were happening, the sweats and that were still going on, and the pain was annoying. Mm-hmm. But as the months were going on and I was trying to figure all this out, the stuff with my spine was getting worse and worse, and the pain level and stuff was happening. Things weren't right. And so it prompted me actually, well, after the 6 months, in about May of 2019, that surgeon abandoned me. And at that point in time, I was left with no surgeon, and no other surgeon wanted to see me because of liability. And it was a mess. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I kind of suspected what might have been occurring based on some of my images that I was looking at, but I didn't quite know, because it's just not something you can find. It's a very rare condition. Mm. And so it's called periprosthetic osteolysis. It's where your spine starts cannibalizing away at a very progressive rate. My spine was rejecting that device, that metal device. Wow. And when I saw those images that were I usually have all my imaging, but I wasn't looking at things side by side. I would see stuff when I'd go in the office to see him the first 6 months, and he'd put what he put up on the screen, and that's what I would look at. But I always still would get my imaging and bring it home, but I wouldn't oftentimes pull it up and match. Mm-hmm. But I started seeing things, and it prompted me to start digging and doing research, because, you know, if no one's going to see me, I might as well try to figure out what's going on here. And that's when I started thinking that I might have had some kind of a metal allergy. And that's when I really started digging deep, and ended up sending, well, it took a while. This is about almost another 6 months has gone by even since then. But in between that stretch, I finally did have touch or communication with a GI doctor at my medical organization that I go to. And because I went in for my first colonoscopy as well. And at that same time, I talked to her about these issues. Like not so much the night sweats, even though, because it should have already been there for her to read. So she should have known that was part of the things that was going on, but it was the pain. And she initially thought it was a possible hiatal hernia. And this was the first time I had ever heard of her, because she says, I want you to take this. She had prescribed a bottle of the not Protonics, but the omeprazole, which is a prescription form of the Prilosec. And so she said, if I want you to take this and see if that pain at night goes away. And also she's prescribed some lidocaine patches. And I said, I already had some at home for my spine, so I didn't need her to prescribe those. And so I tried the lidocaine patches, did nothing. And then I started, the reason I told her, I says, well, I don't have acid reflux, so why would I take the Prilosec, right, if I'm not feeling it? She says, well, oftentimes you don't feel it. It doesn't come up your throat. You actually have it's called a silent case of, you basically have a silent case. And like that pain that I'm getting, honestly, could be actually the acid festering with that area, and it's just not coming up my throat.
Wow.
And so that's what's causing the pain, especially if you have a lesion there, or you have, and see, this is just it's if you have an ulcer or any kind of a raw area in there and you've got acid touching it, that's going to do exactly what I'm feeling, that pain.
And acid reflux is like, even in that area, any type is a precursor for esophageal cancer altogether. And it's
She should have. And, moving forward with this, I mean, this is precisely the reason why endoscopic procedures should have been done, to look, to see, because that pain, obviously represented acid on something that is raw in that vicinity, which could be, an ulcer or anything else. But that didn't happen. And so, and that was in 2019. Now, I did drop the ball myself. I was going through a lot with my spine at that time. By that time, it was already late October of 2019. It was heading into December. And I actually, when I went back looking at my logs, I actually had an appointment scheduled with her for a follow-up. And I thought it even showed, it was logged for 20 minutes. I just questioned her about that because I wanted to go back and see why things didn't happen. Like, why was there not an endoscopy done to look for the hiatal hernia? Why, and there's no answers as to what happened. I know that, like, by that time, it was right before the pandemic hit. There was a lot happening, and I was so focused on my spine that this became, like, secondary. It was not. I mean, I was in so much.
And you wouldn't know. You wouldn't.
I was on morphine. At this time, and even that couldn't touch the pain that was going on in my spine. I was in a very, very bad state. I mean, they wanted me on fentanyl, but I refused to take it because I needed to be able
to do all these things for you, except what you need to have done, basically.
And yet, well, it's because I've got this other stuff, and it's still that endoscopy should have been something that should have been done based on the symptoms that I had. It didn't. And so what had happened is I ended up eventually locating another surgeon that rescued me at UC San Diego, and he yanked all the metal out of my spine. Wow. I had metal allergy tests done. I sent my blood off to Germany and off to another lab down in Chicago called Orthopedics Analysis. The one in Germany is called Melissa. They're a diagnostic testing, and they specialize in testing for different types of metal and metal compound and other types of similar types of compound allergies and sensitivities. And lo and behold, I mean, the first one, the one in Germany, I couldn't send until after I had all the metal out, but I eventually did. The orthopedics analysis one, though, did come back before I had my surgery. So it basically it told me and also my new surgeon exactly what was the problem. It confirmed. And I was doing all this before I ever even met him. I was already putting all this in place. I just didn't have the results back yet once I had him.
Right.
So
when did they finally when you finally fought to have an endoscopy, when was that?
It was right. So I had the all the metal out of my spine. That was in May of 2020. I flew into San Diego and was there for 4 days and had all that happen. And then because a lot of my pain just vanished, guess what started sticking out again? The pain that I was having on my side started feeling a little more pronounced again, but it still took me until about January, the next following, or January of 2021. So I mean, it's, you know, going through a recovery from a spine surgery, just it takes a while. And so by the time I mean, it took me until 2021, and I opened the drawer and I started to take those pills, right? Because I wanted to see, and I took it one day, and then I says, okay, it didn't seem to help. And so then I took it another day, and this went on for about 2.5 weeks. I was taking the omeprazole. It was a 40 milligram or 20 milligram. I don't remember. It was just one a day. I started noticing weird things, like things didn't smell right, taste right. Like I didn't like what it was doing, and it didn't seem to be having any impact on that pain.
Right.
And so, but then what happened next was, I thought it could have been food poisoning. And this was about 2.5, 3 weeks into it. I ingested some food, and one of the ingredients was a real high fat content. It was like a Beijing beef dish, which I didn't realize, when you're not producing certain enzymes because PPIs are blocking that, it could have, things can just react differently. But I was vomiting. I mean, I just started vomiting. So that was the symptom that basically, I didn't know if it was food poisoning, but everything told me that it was an allergic reaction to the omeprazole, because I had symptoms before that. So in my mind at that time, I was thinking, I am allergic to this. It's not uncommon. I have allergies to other medications. And I did have symptoms leading up to finally the vomiting. And so up taking the pill. 4 days into it, the symptoms started disappearing. So that kind of confirmed, right? I almost became complacent, but I did pull up my last message where I left off with my GI doctor, and I sent her a message, and I said, hey, this is what's happening. This is where I'm at now. I said, and I don't know if I was allergic to this or what, but I started vomiting and couldn't stop after eating. And so she got me in within 72 hours for an endoscopy. And so I was in there, and this was in February of this year. And she didn't see anything that actually looked unusual to her, other than, some like an ulcer looking area, nothing like protruding like a tumor that would look obvious like I had a tumor. So it was deeper than it was superficial. So so she took plenty of biopsies. She's very, very thorough. And then I ended up receiving I was waiting, not hearing anything on the pathology. And I never would have dreamed. The last thing on your mind is to think that you're going to have cancer. I mean, I was thinking maybe I had an ulcer or something like that was being irritated, but cancer was the furthest thing from my mind. I had never even really heard of esophageal cancer, because you just don't hear about it.
Right.
And so so she sent me the one-liner that you get when they don't want to tell you in writing what's going on, right? So she called me, and that's when she disclosed to me that she found cancer. And then immediately following that, I'm getting a digital message from her in my MyChart. And in that message, nowhere is there a referral to oncology. Nowhere is there a referral for a PET scan, but it says in her message, a referral to thoracic surgery for a possible esophagectomy. And here I am trying to process all this, and this is what I'm seeing, and my head was spinning, and this is when I dove into my computer and started joining all these groups very quickly within days. I mean, I was just absorbing a lot of information.
It's interesting to know for families who are not given that opportunity, as you are not, to sit down with a doctor face to face and say, this is what we found, these are your options, what resources do you need? I think that's like across the board. A lot of families that I've spoken to weren't given the opportunity to really kind of go over their options. It was kind of like, you have it, this is what we're gonna do.
Well, like they're telling you, and I've seen that. Mine initially was that they weren't, I mean, even if I would have had the referral from oncology, the PET scan I was a little irked about. That should have been like number one, right off, let's do a PET scan to rule out that I don't, that it's not anywhere else in my body, that nothing else lights up.
Right.
Regardless, that should have been an instant thing. And that was actually reaffirmed by the thoracic surgeon that I eventually months later talked to, who had to order that for me. And I'll get into that, but it's, it's just, there are systems out there that are broken. And as a patient, it's hard. It's like sometimes can be a full-time job, having to navigate your health. And I don't know how some people do it or what they do, because they don't have the capabilities of maybe somebody like me being able to do the things I'm doing. And so
like my father, they would ask a family member, what should I do to come with them to the appointment? If your father's older, like I have a lot of networks on here, their fathers or their grandfathers are older, and they have to come with them, and they have to digest all of this information. They have to take this all in and decide, do I do my research? What is this? What is the first step? So what was your emotion when when they're telling you, oh, you just have to have it, basically, let's just butcher it out, and then.
I wouldn't meet with a thoracic surgeon right away. That's just it. What had happened is when this was happening, I knew, first off, because I dug and started researching really quick, pulling up all kinds of case studies and information online, stuff to do with, because I didn't even tell anybody here, like my staging. So I was initially, I ended up moving my case to Stanford, which they're nationally renowned, but they even had I contemplated navigating an esophagectomy, I never would have even done that with Stanford, because they don't do the volume. They don't have the experience for something that complicated. It's a very morbid and complex surgery that it doesn't matter how healthy you are. It's, there's mistakes made by, you just don't know. It's a numbers game.
Right.
So it really is a numbers game. And with my luck, looking in the past with surgeries and procedures, I don't like my odds.
Right.
So I really don't like my odds.
And nobody should be rushed into making that kind of decision for themselves unless they, like you had said to me privately, always go for a second opinion. I think that's a great thing to take.
Second, third, fourth, fifth,
however many, right.
And I know, in in Europe and Canada and other countries, you don't have to worry about the whole financial aspects and all of the bureaucracy of the insurance companies and what you can and can't do. That is a very, very challenging task for all of us. And especially when you have so many things that you are seeing and having to get approved for all these different procedures and appointments, and whether or not,
and you're waiting for an approval.
Oh, and I happen to be, like, I consider myself an expert on that level with both not only insurance, but also in navigating the insurance. I have quite a bit of experience. I'm very knowledgeable in that. And so I know how to navigate all of that very well. Not to say that I don't appreciate the time that I have to spend. It's a lot of time, and it's
But you're
I
fortunate.
wished.
You're fortunate to have that on your side. That you're not going to sit there and let them tell you what you're going to do with your own health.
Well, if I would have had a different insurance, I would be in a different situation. And that's the way it is. I mean, had I had an HMO plan, I could have really been in a worse situation, not being able to see and consult with who I wanted, or even being able to go where I wanted. And also certain tests, because some of the insurance companies, even some of the HMOs, tied with certain other insurances, because my plan, actually, I have two plans. And so one plan picks up the 20%. So that one that picks up the 20% really can't balk at anything. It has to pay for everything that the first one approves. There's no real question. So it's a requirement.
So when you opted out of the surgery,
well, I did have a certain, everybody forgets, and this is what I want to get past. There is one other surgery. It's a less invasive surgery, and that is a resection, a tumor resection. And somehow, some way, and I'm going to get this in writing. I have a few GI doctors I'm going to talk to and try to get some stuff written about this, especially for patients that decide that, or patients that are told that an esophagectomy is not something that they can do or be considered because of it's metastasized. Their staging and everything is off. Mine's T1. I have a stage T1B, NO, MO, and also stage 2. My radiation oncologist, and their team they consider me a T2, but then Stanford and UC Davis wants to consider me a T1B, even though they haven't been in me as much as the others.
Right. Okay.
Stanford's the one who resected my tumor and did the real thorough work. And I had to have them elaborate on the diagnoses in my case while I was actually in San Diego, when all of a sudden I had my radiation oncology telling me I had a T2 when I was questioning their cases like mine. I wanted some history on cases like mine and the success and the complications that they've seen, so I know what I'm getting myself into as I'm navigating through the proton, because I went through the proton beam radiation therapy. And that is one of the things I'm seeing with a lot of patients out there with private insurance or in the States, is that some of the insurances they have do not cover that. They're declining to allow these patients to have proton beam radiation. It isn't offered everywhere either, so it's not in every city. Sometimes you have to travel hundreds, if not thousands of miles to get this radiation. And so, we know insurance doesn't pick up those costs. And so those are costs that we have to pay. So, I mean, for me, just my lodging for my radiation treatment, I went through 25 sessions down in Southern California. I was living down there for 2 months. My lodging alone was about $7,000 for those 2 months. The American Cancer Society was shut down. So I had no help with any of my expenses for any of that, but it was my life. And so if I have to go in debt, I am. I mean, because, if you have a choice and you know that taking the other radiation is more of a slice and it's going to slice through your lungs and your heart, but yet you can choose the other radiation that is the more targeted for your specific area, what are you going to choose? People should not have to choose. People should not have to be denied something like this. I mean, they just should not be denied a safer radiation treatment for this specific type of cancer. Your heart, your lungs, your liver are all right there, and your spine. This kind of radiation, it does penetrate in through the spine, so your spine is getting impacted. That's one of the things that had me really concerned because of my spine issues. So it does impact your bone marrow, which changes things on a cellular level in your body. I also did undergo 1 round of chemo while I was there. So I made my own plan. So I basically, when I moved my case to Stanford, I had a GI specialist there. He went in my stomach twice, down my throat, into my stomach twice. The first time was in March of this year, and the second time to actually resect the tumor was in
wow.
April of this year. And believe it or not, at that point, I had had 3 endoscopies already
Wow.
by 2 different doctors, and still hadn't had a PET scan, still hadn't been referred to medical oncology. And even Stanford, so Stanford did the same thing to me that
Wow.
they did. So like and here I am, I already mapped my course by this time. I wasn't sitting around, because everything that I learned, you'll get doctors telling you that, oh, it's very slow moving cancer, but you know what the facts are is once the symptoms start, once the symptoms begin,
Right.
that's what's telling you that it's
Already,
progressive.
yeah. You got to work.
Yeah,
You got to move faster than the cancer. You got to move fast.
once those symptoms, like when I say symptoms, that's what really irks me the most, is because those relevant symptoms were those night sweats and those systemic types of symptoms back in 2019. I probably I may have been a stage 0 possibly at that point.
Right.
So,
it could have been in the very, yeah.
Yeah, and even in early stages like that, I've learned that every patient is unique, and their bodies react to things differently. So like somebody can have no symptoms, even having stage 3, but somebody at stage 0 could really have symptoms. I mean, that's how our bodies are. I mean, like there's no two exactly the same.
Let's talk about when your latest scan was, and how did you feel when there was nothing detected, when you pretty much
well, as we
got good news.
So I had good news that I had the tumor resected. I ended up I even, as all my plan was going on, I did a self-referral to the California Proton Beam Therapy California Proton Cancer Therapy Center. I always forget which, and that's in San Diego. For people to know it's relevant, there's only 2 in California that do this type of radiation treatment, and most of their patients fly in for this, so they're from other areas. Great place to go. You know, the best radiation type of treatment in my opinion for this. Stanford didn't agree. I'll just say that. This is the thing that happens. Even with Stanford, the GI doctor, I kept hearing him repeat esophagectomy over and over and over, like after the tumor was resected and we were on a phone call. And I told him, I says, I already told you that's not on the table. I told you what my plan is. And at this point in time, I already had involved another GI doctor. I knew I wasn't going to stay with Stanford moving forward with monitoring my cancer. So I had a doctor at UC San Diego. He's a GI specialist there that I already had brought in on my case at UC San Diego for the future. So because the way that I saw things for my path, knowing that I was not going to consider an esophagectomy at this time, and perhaps never, was that I was going to be a closely monitored patient, and I'm going to be doing everything via radiation and possibly some kind of immunotherapy, because I had a feeling that chemo may not work well for my system. So
well, everybody does different. So they would, like saying advice for families. Usually it's the chemo radiation combination, but that's like you're saying, every person's individual,
it's very common right now. Like the research out there, I knew a lot before. I did involve a medical oncologist after I secured my radiation therapy setup. I involved an oncologist over at UC San Diego, because I knew that I wanted to concurrently run a chemo regimen for my best interest, if my body can tolerate it. And at that point in time, I already knew the different types of regimens that were being used, the oxaliplatin and the oxalata, which was the oral formula, and I did a lot of reading on those. And I knew that because of my metal allergies, a lot of people may not realize that the chemistry in a lot of these chemos, it contains metal compounds. And so going into it, I knew I might have issues. So I did do one round of chemo Unfortunately, I had a lot of adverse reactions. It almost caused me to have to actually drive back home and terminate my treatment altogether. But I made it through it, locked in my hotel room for 7 days. I made it through that. And so I made it through one round of chemo, and I finished 25 of my 30 radiation treatments. And then early September, I drove back home the over 600 miles, had my mountain bike with me the whole time. Of course, I was riding actually during a lot of this going on down there. Like the end was really bad because the radiation did make me really sick and nauseated in the end. But I was trying to get out and ride my mountain bike as much as I could when I was there. And, yeah, it wasn't easy. I pushed through a lot of pain and suffering. So, but something about like being active always, I mean, that's my outlet mentally. That's what keeps me sane. That's what keeps me happy. That's my happy place. So here comes the good news. So October, and then about the end of October, no, middle of October, I think it was about October 17th, I was doing training for a new job that I was starting, and I had to travel a little bit of a distance to that job, and I started that, I woke up not feeling well the first day, like that I was supposed to do the drive and go through a full day of training, and it was coming out of the front of my area. And this, I had already been home for let's see, so I got home about September 6th, so this was October 17th, I think, roughly. So that's how long I had been back from my treatment. Well, I made it through that day, but I barely made it through that day of training. I mean, my son told me when I walked through the door that I looked like I was going to die. I mean, I was in a real bad state, and I was in a really bad state, and it was scary. I mean, I eventually, by midnight that night, ended up having to call an ambulance to take me into the emergency room. I mean, the pain was so bad that, so what had happened as a result of that, and, this is just, things like this happen to a lot of people. You end up getting false readings, and false things happen that send you into a spiral. And that did it happened to me there. I ended up with a CT scan being done. I had this was a different hospital 5 minutes from my home. I didn't go to my other hospital, but they ended up doing a CT scan, and the read on that CT scan, both the radiologist and the ER doctor both had me believing that my cancer had metastasized to my liver. And because of, it just like, they implied as such, and so they threw me into a tailspin. And so here I am. They wanted to admit me for pain control, and I didn't want to be admitted. It was the morphine wasn't enough that they gave me when I was in there. But I eventually came home and declined being admitted. I just did not want to be admitted. And so I came home, and because I actually had some old morphine in my drawer at home from back in 2000, from back when I was having to use it. I still have some old medication left over if I needed something stronger. So, but by the next day, those symptoms had stopped. But this prompted all of my, what was supposed to be follow-up testing, right? So the PET scan, and another endoscopy. My GI doctor, she's not a specialist, so I couldn't have the EUS done, but she went in there. She got me in within a few days. I mean, I was in there having an endoscopy, and when she went in there, she actually took samples and sent them off. Yeah, so like I had the PET scan. PET scan came back not showing anything out of the usual, other than the other areas that we were concerned about before that lit up again. So I followed up on those, and those came back. I eventually followed up on those areas, and it was nothing to worry about.
Okay.
But the scan or the pathology that came back out of that area, there was no cancer found. And then the latest, the PET scan had been done already, so that was good. The actual real appointment that I had already had scheduled with my doctor at UC San Diego, who's the GI specialist. I flew down to San Diego, and one day I flew down and back, same day, for the endoscopy. And he ran the, you know, everything looked great. So, I mean, the radiation's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's basically destroyed what cancer cells might have been remaining after the tumor resection. And so there's, you know, the findings are indefinite for high-grade dysplasia, and there is no invasive carcinoma seen.
Wow.
So, like, and that was November 4th. And so I already have my next appointment already scheduled, and that is in February. So every 3 months, I will be undergoing an endoscopy. So to look at things. So the PET,
that's
the
a
PET
long
scans,
journey. It's a very long journey, and it's a very tedious.
And it's going to continue like this. I mean, nearly indefinitely. But I think after a year, you know, I think really, you know, even like after a year from now, not a year from when everything started, but a year from now, I mean, if PET scans are clean by then, safe to say, I mean, that there was plenty of time for whatever microscopic cells to grow large enough to be seen on a PET scan. I think safe to say a year to year and a half from now, I mean, I can be celebrating, you know, really.
So
I mean,
you're still, even though it hasn't shown anything, you're still giving it. Yeah.
I mean, I'm still
But your
gonna,
fight
you know,
so far is amazing. Your fight
never
so far, and I would say it's amazing. And what advice do you have for families who, like I said, there's a lot of people have reservations about sharing survivor stories. So what's your advice on self-advocacy, and I guess to close off the session, what's your message to people who are really struggling with the medical system, and what about advances in early detection? You know, because that's a big thing, is early detection.
And that's just it. You know, they should have you know how I mean, we all go through those questionnaires at every single appointment. Now we've got them digital, which is even better in the digital ones. They need to have a questionnaire specifically for the upper GI area that asks questions, and then the next question can be based on the next question that profiles you into a status of whether, this person needs to be referred over to GI to be followed up for possible dysplasia, or, you know, possible Barrett's esophagus. You know, I'm just saying that, like, the signs are there. I mean, if you have any history of acid reflux or the pain, you don't even have to feel the acid, it's the pain. I mean, that anything coming out of the upper GI area, I mean, that's enough to warrant. But I mean, they obviously we have a lot of awareness for the colon and for colonoscopies, and we've watched how that has changed. But esophageal cancer, I mean, it's scary that the money involved in the research is so little.
Right, I agree.
And that, I mean, just being out there and having to dig the data, what data? It's like there's no comparison, and I'm like, what little data I can find.
And people, don't have, and people, you know, aren't going to look for this because they don't know it exists. So it's.
And you have to be vigilant. You have to ask a lot of questions. Don't go into an appointment alone. And I'll tell you why you don't want to go into an appointment alone. And I did this today. I had an appointment with a new GI. I was going to bring in yet another GI specialist. So number 4, or wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. This was another one of the specialists, so that would make number 3 for having 3 of these specialists involved in my case.
Right.
The one at UC Davis, my local one that I never wanted to involve in the beginning. I just don't like to have everybody under the same hat, because I think that's not in my best interest. I feel that I'm going to get better opinions, and I'm going to get people, they don't know each other. And so that's kind of how I like to navigate things. So I get honest opinions, and not everybody telling you the same thing.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes when they're under the same roof, you're going to get them telling you the same thing. And that's the truth. I mean, some organizations are worse when it comes to that. The teams are so
Right.
in tune, that, you know, they are set to, like, everybody, like that esophagectomy, the word, and like repeatedly
Mm.
pressuring and pushing you and
Right.
pushing that on you, like that's the only option. It's
Right.
not.
Right. It's not. Right.
So that the GI specialist, that anyone going through esophageal cancer, the GI specialist that you see that goes in there, you really need to press them
Mm.
and ask them, if I don't have an option, if I don't want to entertain the idea of having an esophagectomy,
Mm.
if I go through radiation and I get this tumor shrunk, can you actually go in there and resect that tumor, and then
Right.
I
Right.
can, you know, we carry on from there. Say they shrink it down to a certain size. I mean, what is the allowable size? And then they can just go in there and remove the tumor that way.
Right.
The
Right.
remainder of it, right, to free up whatever dysphagia and other things that you have going on. I mean, I know that's something that's possible. I was going to try to get that in writing and see where the cutoff is on that,
Right.
and how they do that. I mean, I had mine removed before the radiation. I know that protocol is there, that they don't typically do they don't do surgeries at least for 3 months after any kind of radiation
Mm.
and
Right.
chemo treatment, because your system is a mess, and
Well, that's
it can make
important,
things
and like
very
you're saying,
complicated.
it's important for anybody going through that to know what the process is, and somebody should sit down with them and explain that to them.
But bring somebody with you that has a notepad, or bring a recorder that is voice activated, and say,
Right.
hey, I'm turning this on. I need this because I need to be able to go over this when I get home. I'm going through we go through grief. We're grieving. We're going through so much as a cancer patient. I mean,
Right.
I'm not going through the grief so much now. I get little bouts of it now and
Mm-hmm.
again, and it's usually, you know, like different things go through my mind or whatever, and it just brings it about. But I mean, I was really grieving right off the bat, and that went on. I felt like I was out of my head in a different place while I was trying to do all this research on
Right.
my own.
Right.
Through the whole chemo radiation, I was scared. I didn't think there were times I honestly didn't think I was going to make it through that and make it back home.
Wow.
I was there alone, going through this all on my own with nobody. So I don't have, you know,
Power to you.
I don't have the husband or the family that's helping me navigate any of this. I've done it all by myself. And
Wow.
so
That's amazing. So anybody who does have does have family, they need to get them fully involved in
yeah, notes. What
every,
happens is,
yeah, keep track of everything.
after these appointments, what happens is, a lot of these doctors, they have to go in later and they write in the notes. And if you
Yeah, but it's
are ever
important. I think it's important for the patient to have it so they can think about it's their life. You know, like the
yeah,
doctors have it for their records, but
well,
you have
yeah,
it
and
for
those
your
notes
life
are
to make a
often
decision.
erroneous and wrong. You
Right.
know that I had mentioned to you that I had this GI specialist that I had just went and seen. I
Mm.
instantly today, I went in to look to see if the notes had been done. Sure enough, they were, and they were full of errors. And
Wow.
so, I went back
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote, this is exactly
But
what
you're
happened
right.
in that meeting. And he went back in and he changed all the notes.
Right.
But it happens every time. And I repeated it to them, and I said, this is exactly why I choose to do video, because it's not only that it places accountability on you, but it
Mm-hmm.
also helps you, because you can go back and you can reference this video before you do your notes to
Right.
remember what happened during that session. You can't expect a doctor to have that kind of retention after seeing 20 patients in a
Right.
day,
That's true.
and be able to, you know, and
Right.
this happened to be his assistant, that the other doctor that I had sent you his name, that wrote all these. But I mean, believe me, I was a little bit shocked to see some of the erroneous errors in there. I mean, everything from where I had my radiation treatment was wrong
Wow.
to, I mean, there was multiple levels, and this is permanently on your medical record. And these notes that they have, that's what carries to the next doctor you go to. They look and read these notes. This is what resonates with the next specialist that you go to talk to about your case. They take those notes. So if they're wrong, and there's erroneous errors in there, I mean,
well, I said
yeah,
good
it's
for you, and I think that your
always
story and this is going to be an inspiration. We're gonna wrap it up, and
okay.
we're gonna, you know, maybe you can help us find some more survivors. Maybe you can put us in touch with a GI doctor. Put us in touch with somebody who
Yeah,
can
I'm
give us
looking to
an
try to
idea.
get some relevant. Yeah, it'd
Yeah,
be
because
nice to get
I
some
would like it,
relevant.
especially as a reporter and you know, writing for a health magazine. Maybe we can get some insight on, you know, why it's not a mandate, why endoscopies are not mandated. You know, even, you know, colonoscopies, prostate cancer, breast cancer. You know, I think that's what yeah, that's what my mission
And
would
yet
be.
they're backstepping. I heard yesterday that they're actually backstepping endoscopies. In other words, so there's going to be even less
Right.
endoscopies being done moving
It's
forward.
crazy,
I mean,
and
I don't understand that.
I don't
It's
understand. I mean, that's what I think, you know, our mission is. I hope people watch this video. It's going to be public. I'm going to upload it on YouTube later on. And so you can share it. And if you like, you know, if you want me to help you advocate, we're going to do that. I know you're all the way on the West Coast. I'm on East Coast. But we can work it from both ends of the country, and we can raise
yeah,
awareness. So I'm going to
one of my sisters lived in your area for 13 years actually. She moved
wow.
back here from there in 2009.
Excellent.
So, but she lived on Staten Island for 13 years there.
Yeah,
So,
that's the East Coast right there.
yeah, yeah.
So
So, I
thank you
remember
so much. And thank you so much for sharing
yeah,
your story,
thank
Carolyn.
you for
We'll talk
having me.
soon.
And yeah,
You're very
anybody
welcome.
that watches this, you know, don't hesitate to, and I always will extend, you know, anybody reach out to me, send me a message if you want, you know, to hear anything or like, I mean, I don't give medical advice, but
But give
I
your
can
own, you know,
certainly,
your own feedback, and just as anybody who's fighting or needs some kind of even closure, you know, it's
or
always great to
advice on
have
navigating certain
you.
things. Like if you
Yeah,
just need, like if you have any questions about navigating certain things, even your insurance, I mean, seriously, like things
right.
like that, that can really be a problem and a struggle.
Mhm.
Like you want that type of radiation, but how do
Right.
you do that? How do you ask for that? You know,
Right.
because
That's
uh,
yeah, it's a whole other
yeah,
side of even, you know, when you're in the thick of it. It's good to have the resources, and even to ask somebody, well, how did you go about that? How did you, you know, because you're already, the person's already sick, the person's already feeling like they're dying, and that's
yeah,
an added burden to them to deal with the medical system, as you know, as a superficial factor of their, you know, of their grieving. So, but I
yeah.
appreciate everything that you've told us,
And
and you're
yeah,
very inspirational. We're
hopefully
grateful
we
for
have a
you.
follow-up because as you very well know, 3 months from now, things could change. I
Right.
mean, like, but you know, we'll
We're
be
gonna
in
hope for the
communication.
best. We're gonna keep
But
us
yeah, I'm going to
posted.
look for other stories to help for you too. I
Yeah.
told you I've seen a few out there, so it's a matter. I'm like, well, okay, they would, you know,
Mhm.
let's send them over to Dara.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
Thank you
and
so
then
much,
yeah,
Carolyn.
so
Thank you so
thank
much.
you, and
Have a good
I'll
night,
talk to you
and
soon.
we'll
Yeah,
keep in
you too.
touch. I'll talk to you. We'll chat tomorrow morning, and we'll catch up on the
Happy
video.
running if it's not raining there. We have rain going
Yes,
here. I
yes.
couldn't.
Thank
I
you so
this.
much. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
So.
Have a great night, and thank you so much for joining us, and we'll
All
speak to you
right.
soon. Have
Good
a great one.
night. Merry
Thank you. Have a
Christmas.
good
Happy
night.
New
Merry
Year.
Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Bye.